Welcome to Fulfilling This Belly Sting. A show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Day. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Look at that.
Good morning and happy Tuesday to you. Today we celebrate the Norse god Tyr, a wonderful god, and has a very personalized connection with me, as my great grandfather was named in honor of the god Tyr. His name was, of course, Tyrion. Before we get started today in talking about our courage, let's take a moment and say talk for all of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed. For those of you who haven't, please take a moment and just select from any one of the podcasts or the video programs, and like, follow, subscribe. Help us to get into the algorithm that distributes this message even further, and helps those who may need to find some level of intellect that can help them obtain or maintain their mental space. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to my friends and family at New Reality TV, newrealitytv.com, a wonderful streaming channel with a collection of just many different perspectives on our spiritual path that can help us to grow and to really learn to understand the effects of this reality at which we live. So, today I want to talk about Tyr, but more importantly, courage. What is courage, you say? Well, courage, of course, is the ability to use cognizant thought to process through overwhelming emotional energy of fear. Many people who experience courage are only they're just able to maintain some cognitive space within their processing that allows them to kind of break down the fear, break down this overwhelming emotional energy, and actually be who they are. Recognize the powers within themselves, and certainly within their pulling from the ancestors. So courage is simply, it isn't the conquering or the removal of fear. It's the ability to use cognitive thoughts when being overwhelmed by fear. So many of us experience courage even though we may not even know it. So when we think about courage, one of the most, I would say one of the larger groups of individuals whom I deal with find where they're struggling between perceived societal expectations and who they really are and who they are at the core. We've spoken many times about these rocks at the bottom of our well of the self, right? And we've spoken about it, and we've said these rocks represent the values, the virtues, the intrinsic core of who we are and who we've become, based on many different factors. Obviously, environment, other people, particularly those with whom we've given some level of authority, how they've taught us and kind of moved us to this collection of rocks. Now, we maintain these rocks throughout our lifetime, and we're going to pull some out, we're going to put some in, we're going to kind of move them around, we're going to navigate them, so that this picture that we create with the mosaic of these beautiful rocks represents who we really are, what we really believe down deep in our hearts. This is why my great-grandfather really uses the analogy of this well, is these values that we hold deep inside of us. It makes us who we are. Now, some of these rocks, obviously, as we know, are given to us by our parents as we're very young, in those formative years when the brain is developing. We're picking up values from those around us, right? From obviously parents, elders, and then as we gain a few experiences, we're going to begin to accept values from our peers, those other guys around us, those other folks around us who are kind of influencing us in such a way that we're going to kind of begin to collect these rocks, or these values from other people. And this collection of rocks that we collect from all these people around us are going to create the value of who we are at our very core. Now, recognizing the beauty of that, of what's been provided by your environment, what's been provided by those in authority around you, what have been provided by your peers, and arranged in such a way that it creates this image. This image of those rocks, arranged in such a way, of such a pattern, represents how well we like this picture is our self-worth. Okay, so we're building many values. I'm always reminded of people, even people whom society would say, wait, I don't really subscribe to that value. I don't like what they're believing. I don't like what they're talking about. Okay. Those people, though, have values that they've gathered from their surroundings. It's not like we just magically come up with these things, right? The rocks don't drop out of the clear blue sky. Rocks, or these values that we have, are given to us by anyone with whom we've given a level of authority. So, many cases, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with our immediate ancestors, mom and dad, older brothers, older sisters, aunties, uncles, whomever we're living with, obviously, as we, particularly in those formative years. Again, there are many other authority figures that are given that level of authority either by the self, i.e. parents, uncles, peers, or by others, law officials, judges, religious people. All of those people give us some of these values. Now, the interesting thing about these values is that we are incredibly in control of them. We can deny those values. As an example, we see generational hate is a prime one, whom I love using as an example because it's so easy to see. It's very demonstrative in that way. If, for example, my parent is very anti, whatever, very maybe racist or sexist or all the isms, right? I have a choice. I can choose to deny that rock. They may hold it very closely. They may have a very close value on it. But I can choose to not subscribe to that. I can take that rock and throw it away, right? So this is really the beauty in our self, in our well. Some of these rocks that are given by authority figures, particularly we see in many cases, we have values that are given to us, say as a child, and those values will either expand, i.e. as we grow and we age, those values may become more and more important, more valuable, more rock solid, or we may remove them. We can take them out, right? I'm always reminded, many people have asked me when I was a child, as an example, my father was very abusive. He was very abusive, particularly when he was drunk. And very volatile, right? A very violent man. Now, I looked at that scenario of abuse and violence. In those days, I looked at that as being normal. That was normal. If I was being goofy in public and my father felt like correcting me and poof, he corrected me upside the back of my head or in some other way, it was normal. I didn't feel picked out or singled or nothing like that. That was the expectation. Those values had been placed in me. Now, when I became a father, and my children acted out in public, I could have allowed that value to continue and said, oh, this is the way we correct children. Wapa. But I didn't. I chose a different path. I said, no, this value of violence, of correcting children with violence, this value I don't like it. I don't want it. So I cast it away. My children were raised with understanding. As I said, is this really the way we behave in public? Is this really what where you're going? Now, did this always work? No. Sometimes there were trips out to the car and it was like, okay, you could sit here for a few minutes and we'll cool down. We'll kind of let your brain move on past where you were and we'll start over, right? But it would have been easy for me then to carry my father's value, or that rock of that value, into my parenthood, right? As I began to parent children, or even certainly grandparent, right? So generational hate or generational values may be one of those things that we need to evaluate. We need to look at from time to time and go, is this really what I believe or I want to believe or I want to subscribe to? Is this really it? Okay. I don't think so. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the remainder of a value, an intrinsic absorption of courage. All right? So we'll be right back.
The air. The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me. It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
newrealitytv.com.
Thank you so much for taking that quick break with us. I hope that you got something there, and that those people whom have so willingly supported us in all of our endeavors, I hope that their message to you is resonates, right? When we left, we were talking about courage, and we were talking about arranging our rocks and kind of setting that value and making us who we are. Which brings us to the next real power in courage. And that is when we decide that we are really good enough, right? I know this sounds silly, but many people struggle with this. They're unable to, while they may recognize the value in themselves, they're easily kind of tipped, right? So another individual out there may say, "Oh, I don't like that I don't like your clothes," and we feel some people feel the need to go, "Oh my gosh, I need to go change. I need to go." Why? Because I'm trying to be included in some social organization, some social club, if you will. And so I'm going to kind of cover up one of my values, and that is my independence, my individuality. I'm going to cover that up for sake of being part of this community, this group, right? But then what happens is now the more influences that are occurring, because you got to remember, we're receiving influential energies, whether that be visual, audio, smells, taste, touch, whatever it is. The sixth part that we don't mention very often when we're talking about our senses is imagination. Now, the brain, the human brain, physical human brain, doesn't recognize the difference between imagination and physical sensory input. It doesn't know. Okay? So if we imagine, as an example, that this group is kind of looking down, or however we're framing that in our perspective of this scenario, we're going to kind of cover up some of our intrinsic values, some of what makes us us. And that is where we begin to build up some stresses within the mind. Now, this means when we do witness, or we do absorb sensory input of something that creates emotional trauma within us, creates that energy, we're going to have a much harder time trying to process it. Now, when we started the show today, we talked about courage, and courage being the activity that we use our cognitive space to think our way through fear, through something that is fearful, creating fear. And courage is the ability to continue forward because we're using our cognitive space to now reduce the energy created by this fear. That's really what courage is at its core. So applying that now to being ourselves, this is really where we can really allow our brain the full potential of what it can do. As I mentioned, when we are living outside of our authentic space, when we are pretending to be something that we're not, we're pretending to have a value system that we do not. We don't really want at our at our core, but we're, for sake of inclusion in some group, in some club, we're willing to forego our values and use that value. When we do that, this is called living inauthentically, or stepping outside the authentic space. When we step outside the authentic space, it creates an intrinsic energy in the mind. This intrinsic energy then prevents us from processing more, say, emotional trauma, more emotional trauma energy. So we're limiting the amount of bandwidth that we have in our brain to process emotional energy. Now, when we run out of bandwidth, this energy is going to spill over into other parts of the brain. And literally, it's going to create these physiological symptoms: sweaty palms, anxiety attacks, panic attacks, breathing problems, heart racing, all of those things, right? And we're going to do that when this emotional energy can't get through the processing bandwidth. In addition, what happens when we're really overwhelmed is that our cognitive space, that little space on top of the that we maintain, is now unable to think its way out of this. So it's just overwhelmed. There's no ability to thinking. In other words, what happens is we no longer have the potential of having courage. We can't think our way through this. Our bandwidth is just overwhelmed. This happens. Now, as I mentioned before, the brain doesn't see a difference between physical sensory input, what we've seen, smelled, heard, touched, taste. It doesn't know that from imagination. So we can imagine ourselves in much the same way the brain would then process as it is experiencing. Right? So this is where a very vivid imagination can be both a gift and a not so gifty, if that makes sense, right? Because yes, a vivid imagination allows us to see things and experience things that we wouldn't otherwise. On the other side of this blade is this idea that we can imagine ourselves to multiply exponentially the energy that's processing through our emotional filters, and thereby overwhelming us, maybe even to the point of paralyzation. We're going to paralyze ourselves with fear. Okay? So this happens. How do we get through it? Well, the first key, as we all know, is to still the mind. How do we still the mind? Well, we still the mind in many cases. One of the best practices is that we can use is meditation. Now, meditation doesn't have to be this lofty thing that, we need a certain position and we hold this right and do all this. That's not meditation. Meditation simply means intrinsic reflection, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing is to start in something cyclic. And this is why in many cases, when we're talking about meditation, we're talking about breathing. Very simple task that we're going to use. Because what we're going to do is we're going to draw all of our focus and we're going to bring it down to just breathing. We're going to shut off the other sensory inputs. And all we're going to think about is the cyclic effect of our breathing. Now, in much the same way as when we are maybe drawing something, or for those of you who build little models or little trinkets, maybe do some beading, whatever the case, little sewing, but very detailed little work, right? And so we're really focused on our hands, right? And we're doing something with them. But we're focused, right? So we've brought all this down to a focus. You notice, for those of you who do have these kind of hobbies, and you're very stressed out, it's very hard to get started with your hobby, right? This is because your brain is running Mach speed and it's trying to get through a whole bunch of stuff. And what you're seeing by going to this skill, this talent, this hobby, is that we're bringing all this down to a focal point. And so that's how we can begin this process of stopping all of this and focusing. Now, what I encourage people to do, and sometimes you can have just like a little notepad. I have one here, just a little notepad, and I'll, when I start really going off the rails or I'm really stressing, I'm going to pick up my notepad and I may draw little pictures, little sketches. I may write some things, just some, silly things, whatever the case. What's the difference is that now I focused all my attention now on this. What's happening is I'm casting all of this other stuff out. All right? So this is a trick we can use to kind of trick our brain into kind of bringing it back. And now we can gain some cognition. We're reducing what's in the bandwidth so that now we can increase that cognition, and we can actually begin to think our way through this emotional trauma. So it's really a little trick that I use, and certainly I've seen many other people use when they're just really being stressed, and maybe they've built up some of this this stress caused by living inauthentically. They've got some of this stress in their mind, so they've got a reduced bandwidth to start with. So here's a way that we can now utilize all of the bandwidth in our mind, and we can process things. We can use our cognitive space to actually think our way through this. Very akin to, you see many different people respond very differently to traumatic events. This is because of the varying gauges that they have of cognitive space. They're breaking down the emotion and now only processing a little at a time, right? And this kind of allows them to continue to function versus being overwhelmed by it, and now we're paralyzed with this emotional energy that we just can't get our mind around, get our hopes around. So a very powerful tool that we can use. Get that focus back. Once the focus is there, then we can kind of cognizant. We can use some cognitive thinking to move forward. So these are really what come to mind when I speak about courage. The courage is that cognitive space, is to use it for your advantage. Don't be intimidated or influenced into being something you're not. Remember, you are a gift. Your journey that began at your birth and has continued to grow, sometimes up, down, man, it's been a journey. It's been a ride. Why? Because you're altering your DNA, you're altering this emotional energy, and you're storing different memories that alters the way you see the world, the way your brain interprets the reality you experience. So the good news about the wonder that you are is that this DNA that you're altering along your lifetime gives you the ability to pass these emotional energies through to create a biochemistry different than anyone else who's ever lived. You are a one of a kind. You may be similar. Even twins and triplets are similar, but they're not identical. You are unique. And that uniqueness is what provides us with the breadth of the spiritual life we can lead. So you are a gift to all of us who realize that. We see you for what you are. You're a gift. You're a wonderful blessing that provides a different perspective that allows others to see the bigger picture of our spirituality. Hopefully, we'll at the same time absorb that different perspectives of spirituality ourselves. So, and grow in the right direction. My friends, it has been a wonderful gift to be with you this morning. I hope that you have a wonderful Tuesday, and I so look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, where we'll talk about the wisdom of Odin, the god, the supreme god of the Norse. For he brings to us this understanding of what wisdom really is and how it benefits us throughout our lifetime. So, today I want you to embrace courage, to be you, to recognize the wonder, the beauty that you are, and realize that you have total control of those values that you hold dear. What makes you you? All right? So I want you to focus today. When you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, go back to some detailed function that you can get that focus back and be you. All right? I wish you the very best Tuesday, and we will see you again tomorrow, where we'll talk about the wisdom of Odin. Have a night.
Watching for Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Wolf Hefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.